My name is Ruth Eleanor Mays. I'm 79 years old, a retired nurse, and I've lived in the same red brick house in Fairhope, Alabama, for nearly 5 decades. I raised 3 children in that home, lost my husband there to cancer, and hosted every Christmas dinner since 1972. That dining room table, 'twas mine. That chair at the head of it, mine too. So you'll understand when I tell you, I never expected to be told there was no room for me at the table I once bought with my own savings. But that's exactly what happened on Christmas Eve. I stood there by the kitchen archway in my best green cardigan, the one my late husband used to say brought out the gold in my eyes. In my hands I held a ceramic dish of sweet potato casserole. Still warm, still steaming, the marshmallows just beginning to brown. I had made it for my son Jacob. And for his wife Cynthia. And for the grandkids who once ran through my legs in diapers but now barely looked up from their phones. I thought I was doing something kind. Something festive. Something a mother should do. Jacob didn't even meet my eyes. He just rubbed the back of his neck and muttered, "Hey Mom, so, about dinner?" I laughed, a little confused. "Don't tell me you overcooked the ham again." He didn't laugh. He glanced toward the dining room. "There's no space at the table this year. Cynthia's mom flew in last minute. You understand. No space." I blinked. My casserole grew heavier in my hands. No space. Then I saw her, sitting in my chair. My chair. The one with the wooden arms and the cushion I stitched myself when I was 34. Cynthia's mother, Dolores, leaned back in it with a full plate already in front of her, laughing, cutting into the ham, wearing pearls that looked suspiciously like the ones I'd passed down last year. She didn't even flinch when she saw me. I looked at Jacob again. "You're asking me to eat in the kitchen?" He smiled nervously like I was being unreasonable. "It's just one night, Mom." But it wasn't just one night. It was every sacrifice. Every babysitting night I'd agreed to. Every emergency loan I'd forgiven. Every home-cooked meal I'd brought to that house after surgeries, colds and childbirths. It all flashed before my eyes like a cruel little movie. And then I did something none of them expected. I turned around, walked right out of that house, casserole still in my hands, and whispered to myself, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life, Jacob." Because by the next morning, I had taken back everything I ever gave them. But what did I do exactly? Let me tell you how we got to Christmas Eve in the first place. It started months earlier. I had been noticing small things. Like how Jacob and Cynthia stopped inviting me over for Sunday dinners. Or how my calls went unanswered for hours, sometimes days. They always had an excuse, of course. The kids' schedules, Cynthia's job, the dog being sick. But I knew when I was being pushed aside. Still I held on. That's what mothers do, isn't it? We forgive. We excuse. We try to understand. But maybe I should have paid more attention when they asked to borrow my second car for a month. Or when Cynthia called asking if I could sign as a guarantor for a small business loan she was getting. "It'll just be on paper," she said. "You won't have to do a thing." That small business loan. It was $85,000. And the car. They sold it within a week. But I didn't say a word. Not then. 'Cause I loved them. And I believed love was supposed to be patient, sacrificial. Until I found out what they were really saying behind my back. I overheard it one day while babysitting. Cynthia forgot her phone on the table and a call came through on speaker before I could stop it. "Yeah, we're trying to ease Ruth out gently," I heard her say. "She's too involved. She acts like she still owns the family. I mean, she doesn't pay the bills anymore." The call ended before I could process what I'd heard. Ease me out. I felt like a ghost in my own life. And it got worse. Jacob started treating me like I was some sort of relic. Talking over me at dinners. Ignoring my suggestions. Brushing off my memories like they were ancient nonsense. "You've had your time, Mom," he once said when I reminded him that our family always opened presents at midnight. "Let the kids make their own traditions." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I stayed quiet. Kept baking. Kept giving. Kept showing up. Until Christmas Eve. Until my chair, the one I earned with decades of love, labor, and loyalty, was handed over to another woman like I was a ghost with no name. But what they didn't know, not Jacob, not Cynthia, not their precious Dolores, was that I still had the power to remind them who built their foundation. And I wasn't going to raise my voice. I was going to raise my pen. And one by one, I began to erase my name from everything I'd given, and take it all back. Every favor, every gift, every ounce of comfort I helped build into their lives. They had no idea what was coming. Just like Cynthia had no idea that the house she was decorating for Instagram clout wasn't even in Jacob's name. That's when the real story began. And if you think Christmas Eve was shocking, wait till you see what happened on New Year's Day. Please like, comment, and subscribe if this story pulled you in, and let me know where you're watching from. The next chapter is coming. You don't want to miss what happens when Grandma Ruth takes back her crown. When I got home that Christmas Eve night, I didn't cry. I didn't even sit down. I placed the sweet potato casserole carefully on the kitchen counter, took off my cardigan and rolled up my sleeves. For 79 years, I had lived as a quiet woman, kind woman, the dependable one. But that night something inside me shifted, something sharp, firm, and unbreakable. I realized I wasn't just humiliated. I was finished being used. I stood in the center of my kitchen and looked around. At the photo albums, the stacks of documents in the cabinet, the spare keys to Jacob's house I never gave back, and most importantly, the file I kept in the drawer below the microwave. The one labeled Assets and Ownership. In case of emergency. They had forgotten something very important. I wasn't just Jacob's mother. I was the woman who co-signed their first mortgage. I had funded their down payment. And technically, legally, I still owned 51% of that house. I had it in writing. Jacob was too careless to read the fine print. Back when he and Cynthia were scrambling to buy their dream house, they didn't have enough money. Cynthia's credit was shot from 2 failed boutiques, and Jacob was freelancing after getting laid off. I offered to help. Not for control, not for power, but because I believed in family. I told them I'd put up the $50,000 down payment, and in exchange, I'd just keep partial ownership on paper until they could pay me back. That was 5 years ago. They never paid me back. Not a dime. I picked up the folder with shaking hands, sat at the dining table and opened my laptop. First, I emailed my attorney. She was an old friend from church, sharp as a tack, and always told me to never let people confuse kindness with weakness. Then I drafted a letter to Jacob and Cynthia. It was polite, firm. I attached a scanned copy of the co-ownership agreement. Subject line: regarding Christmas Eve and ownership matters. I ended the email with, "Consider this your notice. Things are about to change." I sent it. Then I unplugged the Christmas lights from my porch, one by one. Curious what happened next. The very next morning, Christmas Day, I woke up to 30 missed calls. Voicemail after voicemail. Some angry, some tearful. One from Jacob. "Mom, what is this? You're not serious. Please call me." One from Cynthia, less gentle. "You're being petty. It was just a chair." But it wasn't just a chair. It was a symbol, crown. And I wasn't about to be the maid in a palace I built. By New Year's Eve I had escalated things. I filed the papers to take full legal possession of my share of their home. My attorney helped me draft a request for sale. Either they buy out my half, or the house would be listed on the market. And then I did something even more shocking. I showed up, uninvited, with a real estate agent. When they opened the door, Cynthia gasped like she'd seen a ghost. Jacob stood there in sweatpants and disbelief. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" I smiled warmly. "You said there was no space for me, Jacob. So I'm creating some." Cynthia tried to slam the door in my agent's face, but it was too late. My attorney had already emailed them notice of intent. And when they looked it up online, the horror settled into their faces. They realized I could actually do it. I could sell their home right out from under them. Now you may be thinking, why would a mother do that? But maybe the real question is, why would a son let it come to this? Let me rewind. Let me take you back a bit, to when the first cracks began. It wasn't always this way. Jacob used to be my sweet boy. My miracle baby. He came after 2 miscarriages and a high-risk pregnancy. I nearly died giving birth to him, but I'd do it all again. He was soft-hearted as a child, always bringing home strays, writing me cards, hugging me without a reason. When he met Cynthia, I was thrilled. She was charming, well-spoken, ambitious. I helped her through school while she worked part-time, paid her car insurance for a year so she could get to class. And when they got married, I gifted them a honeymoon. I wanted them to thrive. But things started shifting when her mother, Dolores, began whispering in her ear. She's too involved. She's controlling. You need to set boundaries. It didn't help that Cynthia started building this image, the perfect modern family for social media. Her posts were always curated, her captions philosophical. But I began to notice I was disappearing from the photos. First just cropped out, then never even tagged. By the time they had their first child, I was Grandma Ruth on paper. But the old lady who always has an opinion in reality. And yet I still kept giving, babysitting, baking, covering gaps when money ran short. Until one day, I overheard Cynthia talking with her friends in the backyard. She should be grateful we still let her come around. She's had her life. Let her. Let me. That was the seed. But Christmas Eve. That was the harvest. They thought they had outgrown me. They thought they could use me like a doormat, soft, quiet, dependable, and I just keep laying down, catching the dirt off their shoes. But that's the funny thing about doormats. Sometimes they get pulled out from under you. And let me tell you, when I pulled mine, they fell hard. And I wasn't done. Because what I did next, let's just say, they'd wish they had offered me that chair. If you're loving Grandma Ruth's journey, don't forget to like this video, comment below with, "You go, Ruth," and subscribe to the channel. The next chapter is coming, and you won't believe what Grandma does with the keys she never returned. 3 days after the real estate agent stepped into their living room, Jacob and Cynthia finally came to my house. They didn't knock. They pounded. I had just sat down with a cup of tea when I heard the frantic banging. I knew it was them even before I peeked through the curtains. Jacob's truck was parked haphazardly at the curb, and Cynthia stood stiffly beside him, arms folded, face flushed. I opened the door slowly and calmly, the same way I would if a stranger had shown up at my porch. Jacob didn't even say hello. "Are you serious, Mom? You're actually selling the house?" I sipped my tea. "I'm exercising my right to liquidate a shared asset. Unless you'd like to buy me out." Cynthia scoffed. "This is insane. You'd put your own grandchildren on the street." My eyes narrowed. "You didn't seem worried about me eating alone on Christmas Eve." The silence between us thickened. "Look," Jacob said, rubbing his temples. "Maybe we went too far. But this is revenge. You're punishing us." I set my teacup down gently. "No, Jacob. This is consequence. And I taught you the difference when you were 5. They didn't expect that." Cynthia's jaw tightened. "You didn't even warn us." Smiled. "Neither did you when you gave Dolores my chair." That shut her up. But what I said next, that rattled them both. I also wanted to discuss the other items I'll be reclaiming. The second car title is still in my name. And the $85,000 loan. It was never forgiven. I'm drawing up documents for repayment. Jacob's face went pale. Cynthia muttered, "You can't be serious." "I'm very serious," I replied. "And I've spoken to my attorney about garnishment if it comes to that." They didn't stay long after that. But before they left, I handed Jacob a key. The spare key. The one they thought I had lost years ago. "I'm stopping by the house tomorrow," I said. "There are a few items I'd like to collect before the realtor begins staging. And don't worry, I'll let myself in." And I did. The next morning I walked into their house as though it were still my own, because in many ways it was. I took the grandfather clock I had given them on their wedding anniversary. The antique table passed down from my mother. The paintings I commissioned when Cynthia launched her business. Even the kitchen mixer she used every Thanksgiving. A gift from me. As I packed, their youngest daughter, Ellie, wandered in. "Grandma, are you moving?" I knelt down and gently brushed her hair back. "No, sweetheart. I'm just taking what belongs to me. Daddy said you're being mean." I smiled softly. Sometimes grown-ups don't understand consequences until they feel them. It broke my heart to see confusion in her little eyes. But I knew something deeper, that maybe, just maybe, this would one day be the lesson that changed everything for the next generation. But the real storm hadn't hit yet. That came later, when the realtor placed the "for sale" sign outside the house. Jacob called me, raging. "You're really doing this? You're selling our home." "Our home," I repeated. "No, Jacob. You had the chance to make it a shared home. You chose to make it a throne for someone else while pushing your mother into the kitchen. You don't care about us," he snapped. "You're just bitter." "No," I replied calmly. "I'm not bitter. I'm awake." And I meant it. I had spent so many years believing that being quiet and giving would be enough. That they'd remember all I sacrificed. That love would come back around. But it didn't. So I stopped waiting. And just when I thought they couldn't stoop any lower, I received a certified letter in the mail. It was from Jacob. Inside was a formal request. To buy out my half of the house for only $12,000. $12,000. That wasn't just insulting, it was war. They thought I was bluffing. They thought I was too old to fight. But I didn't come this far to fold now. So instead of replying to their offer, I did something bolder. I scheduled an open house. And I made sure the entire neighborhood knew it. Cynthia was furious. She came storming into my yard while I was watering the hydrangeas. "This is a family matter, Ruth. You don't have to humiliate us publicly." I looked her straight in the eyes. "Sweetheart, you did that yourself when you humiliated me privately." I fumed. "You're doing this to punish Jacob." "No," I said, voice steady. "I'm doing this to remind him that his mother is not disposable." Then I added, "You should tell Dolores to pack her things. Someone else will be sitting in that chair soon." She stormed off. But as she did, I saw something flicker across her face. Not just anger. Fear. 'Cause she knew. I was done being polite. I was done asking. And I was done watching the home I helped build turn into a place where I was no longer welcome. But what happened at the open house? Let's just say, a very unexpected guest walked in. Someone who changed everything. If you're standing up for yourself like Ruth, type, "Take it back" in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Next chapter will leave you breathless. You won't believe who shows up at the open house. The open house was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a breezy Saturday afternoon. I wore my Sunday best. A soft lavender blouse, pearl earrings, and the same low heels I wore to Jacob's graduation all those years ago. My real estate agent, Maria, had decorated the place tastefully. Fresh white roses on the table, the smell of lemon polish in the air, soft music humming in the background. But what I hadn't expected was the line outside the door. Neighbors I hadn't seen in years came. Younger couples looking to upgrade. Even an older gentleman from church who smiled and whispered, "They don't deserve a house like this, Ruth. But you do deserve peace." I was overwhelmed, but in the best way. And then he walked in. Not Jacob. Not Cynthia. Not Dolores. It was Paul. My ex-son-in-law. The one married to my late daughter before cancer took her 5 years ago. I hadn't seen him since the funeral. We had lost touch. Too much pain. Too many memories. But there he was. Suit pressed, silver at his temples, kindness still in his eyes. "Ruth," he said, surprised. "I saw the listing online. And then I saw your name." I blinked. "You're looking for a house?" He nodded. "Me and my fiancé. But I never imagined." He looked around. "This house. This war. What's going on?" I told him everything. Quietly. Honestly. Without bitterness. And when I was done, Paul took a long breath. then said the words that would make my blood run cold. "I'm sorry, Ruth. But you need to know, they've been planning this for a while. Jacob and Cynthia. They talked to a lawyer 2 months ago about transferring full ownership. They were going to claim you were mentally unfit, that you'd signed the house over while confused." I felt the air leave my lungs. I gripped the back of the kitchen chair to steady myself. "They what?" "I didn't want to believe it," Paul said softly. "But they bragged about it. At a birthday dinner for one of Jacob's clients. I overheard them laughing. Saying, 'She won't know what hit her. Old people don't fight back. Old people don't fight back.'" I stared at the walls. The floors. The same ones where Jacob had taken his first steps. The same place I once rocked my daughter to sleep while humming lullabies. And now, it was a battlefield. That moment. It lit a fire in me I didn't know I still had. Paul saw it. He looked at me and said, "Ruth, if you want help, legal, financial, even moral, I'm here. You were the only mother I had after Dana passed. I owe you more than you know." I nearly wept. But I didn't. Instead, I squared my shoulders and said, "Then help me close the door on them for good." The open house ended with 5 serious offers. One of them was from Paul himself. But before I could accept, Jacob showed up. Red-faced, breathing hard. He pushed through the crowd like a man uninvited to his own surprise party. "What the hell is going on here, Mom?" Everyone turned. But I didn't flinch. "This is an open house," I said. "And legally, I own half this property. You chose to forget that." Cynthia appeared seconds later, hair wild, eyes darting. "You're going to let strangers buy our home?" "No," I said, locking eyes with her. "I'm going to let dignity walk back in. Through the front door. Something you locked out on Christmas Eve." They begged. Then they threatened. Cynthia screamed. "You'll lose everything, Ruth. You think the court will side with a bitter old woman." And that was her final mistake. Because standing just behind her was Maria, my realtor, and she had been recording everything. "Thanks for that," Maria said, snapping her phone shut. "That'll go a long way in court." Jacob looked horrified. "Mom, please. Don't do this." But I was done with begging. "You already did, Jacob. The moment you said, 'There's no space for you.' You made your decision. Now it's time for me to make mine." I turned and walked out the door. The offers would be reviewed. The papers would be filed. But emotionally, spiritually, I had already moved out of that house long ago. Later that evening, I returned to my own home. The lights were off, and the neighborhood was quiet. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat in the rocking chair my husband built me decades ago. And then the doorbell rang. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to get up. When I opened it, standing there with red eyes and trembling hands, was Ellie, my granddaughter, clutching a backpack and a folded note. "Daddy doesn't know I'm here," she whispered. "What happened, baby?" I asked, heart pounding. She handed me the note. One sentence, written in shaky handwriting. "I don't want to be like them." And that shattered me. I held her tightly, tears slipping down my cheek. Because despite everything I'd lost, maybe, just maybe, I was saving something that mattered even more. But what would happen now that my granddaughter had defied her parents? What did that note really mean? And what secrets had she overheard in that house? Type "fight back" in the comments if you're with Grandma Ruth. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell, because next chapter reveals the truth Ellie's been hiding, and it will change everything. I held Ellie close for what felt like forever. Her little body trembled against mine, not from cold, but from something deeper. Fear, confusion, heartbreak. She smelled like bubblegum shampoo and uncertainty. I didn't ask her anything right away. I simply let her in, gave her a warm blanket, and set a bowl of chicken soup on the table. She didn't touch it. Instead, she sat in silence, legs swinging from the kitchen chair, backpack at her feet like a buried secret. Her eyes kept darting to the front door, as if expecting someone to burst through it and drag her away. Finally, I sat across from her and spoke softly. "Ellie, I need to know. What made you leave?" She blinked, then whispered, "They said they were going to send you away." "Who said?" "Mommy, Daddy, and Grandma Dolores." I swallowed hard. "Send me where?" She reached into her backpack and pulled out a crumpled yellow sticky note. On it, in Cynthia's unmistakable handwriting, were these chilling words. "Contact Brighton Meadows, expedited placement. If Ruth refuses, proceed with power of attorney." My heart dropped into my stomach. Brighton Meadows was an assisted living facility. Expedited placement. Power of attorney. They were planning to institutionalize me. Not because I was ill. Not because I needed help. But because I had become inconvenient. "They said you'd start forgetting things soon," Ellie said, her voice cracking. "That you were old and stubborn. And Daddy said once you were out, he could sign papers without waiting." I couldn't breathe. I had known they were selfish. I had known they were cruel. But I hadn't realized they were preparing to erase me. "Ellie, how did you hear all of this?" She looked down at her knees. I was supposed to be asleep, but Mommy was on the phone in the hallway. I listened from the stairs. I leaned back in my chair. The silence pressed against the walls like a growing storm. So this was it. This was the depth of their betrayal. They hadn't just given my chair away. They were plotting to remove me from my life, my assets, my autonomy, my existence. And they would have succeeded, if not for a 10-year-old girl brave enough to run. I reached across the table and took her hand. "You did the right thing, baby. You were very, very brave." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't want to go back." "You don't have to," I said. "Not tonight. Not ever, if I can help it." But I knew the law. And I knew the storm this would cause. I called Maria, my realtor, and explained what had happened. Then I called my attorney. And within 48 hours, I had filed for an emergency injunction. Not just against the house sale, but for full legal protection of my assets and person. The shocking part. I also filed for temporary custody of Ellie. Because what she had run from wasn't just a toxic household. It was a coordinated plan to destroy her only living grandmother. And I would not let her grow up learning that silence was safer than truth. When the legal papers hit Jacob and Cynthia's mailbox, they exploded. They showed up at my house unannounced. Jacob banged on the door. "Mom, let me in. You're making a huge mistake." Ellie clung to me from behind the curtain. I stepped out onto the porch, closed the door gently behind me, and stood my ground. "You lied to me, Jacob." He was shaking. "No. Well, I was protecting you. You were getting forgetful, leaving the stove on." "I never left the stove on," I said firmly. "And you know that." Cynthia marched up the steps behind him. "We were trying to keep the family together. You're tearing it apart." "No," I said, voice cold. "You did that when you replaced me with a woman who's known my son for 5 years and me for 50. You did that when you schemed to put me away like some piece of furniture too old to fit the decor." Jacob threw up his hands. "So this is about revenge." I took a breath and said the one thing I'd held back all these months. "This is about respect. Something you stopped showing the moment I became useful instead of loved." They stood frozen. The porch light flickered above us. And then Cynthia's voice lowered into a venomous hiss. "You don't know what you've started." Smiled. "Oh, but I do. And it ends with the truth." They stormed off, but not before Jacob spat over his shoulder. "You'll regret this." But I didn't. Not for 1 second. Because that night, Ellie and I sat in the living room and watched old home videos. Of her as a baby, of her mother before the illness, of me and my late husband dancing barefoot in the kitchen. She giggled. Cried. We made hot chocolate and played cards. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone's mother again. Someone's grandma. Someone's home. But the fight was far from over. The next morning I received a visit from Child Protective Services. Cynthia had filed a complaint. She was trying to claim I was unfit to care for Ellie. And she brought a witness with her. Someone I thought would never betray me. Dolores. The woman who sat in my chair. She told them I was forgetful, unstable, and possibly depressed. I looked her in the eye and said, "And you're possibly a liar." But would the state believe me? Or would I lose the only person left who hadn't thrown me away? Comment never back down if you believe Grandma Ruth is stronger than they ever imagined. Like and subscribe to follow the next chapter, where Ruth must face court, and the lies that could take Ellie away forever. The courtroom smelled like old paper and fresh polish. I sat on the left side, wearing the same navy dress I had worn to my late husband's memorial. Ellie sat beside me, hands in her lap, braids neatly tied with pink ribbon. Her small fingers found mine and gripped tight. Across from us sat Jacob, stiff in a blazer he hadn't bothered to button. Cynthia looked smug, legs crossed, tapping at her phone until the bailiff shot her a warning glare. And next to them, like a rotted cherry on a bitter sundae, was Dolores, the woman who replaced me on Christmas Eve, now ready to testify that I was senile. The judge entered. Woman. Nonsense. Gray streaks in her hair. But maybe she'd understand. My lawyer stood and began to present the case. How I co-owned the house, how I had legal documents for every asset I'd funded, and how I'd provided safe, loving care for my granddaughter after she arrived at my door. Your Honor, she said clearly, this is not a custody grab. This is not spite. This is protection. Because if this child returns to that household, she will not only be silenced, she will learn that betrayal wins. That truth doesn't matter. Cynthia's lawyer scoffed. We have testimonies that suggest otherwise. Mrs. Mays has exhibited signs of cognitive decline. She once left her iron plugged in overnight. She forgot a doctor's appointment. Her son and daughter-in-law were merely trying to protect her from herself. I could feel the judge watching me, and I stood, without being asked, 'cause I needed to speak. Your Honor, I said, voice trembling but steady. I am 79 years old. Yes, I have moments where I forget things like most people. But I am not confused. I am not senile. And I am not a woman who forgets the feeling of being discarded like trash on Christmas Eve. Jacob looked away. Cynthia rolled her eyes. Continued. They told me there was no room at the table. Then gave my chair to another woman. They plotted to take what I owned. They filed to declare me mentally unfit not because I was unstable, but because I was inconvenient. Ellie's grip tightened on my fingers. I'm not fighting for revenge. I'm fighting for my right to matter. And for this little girl's right to grow up in a home where love isn't conditional on obedience. The room fell silent. Then the judge spoke. I will take your words under advisement, Mrs. Mays. And I will review the documents thoroughly before ruling. In the meantime, she paused, looking down at her paperwork. Temporary guardianship of Eleanor Mays is to remain with her grandmother, Ruth Mays, pending full investigation and final ruling. Cynthia gasped. Jacob muttered something under his breath. But Ellie turned to me and smiled. We had won a round. But it wasn't over. Outside the courtroom, Jacob cornered me in the parking lot. You're turning Ellie against us, he hissed. No, I said. You did that all by yourself. He leaned in, voice low and cruel. We're going to dig into every part of your life, Mom. Every mistake, every moment you forgot something, every call you missed. You want a war. We'll give you one. I smiled, not because I was unafraid, but because I had one final move they hadn't seen coming. I'd be careful if I were you, Jacob, I said calmly. Because I recorded everything. Every call. Every message. Every bank transfer. And I've handed it over to someone who's very eager to get involved. He narrowed his eyes. Who? You'll find out soon. Because while they were busy playing games in the courtroom, I had called in someone who hadn't forgotten what I meant to this family. Someone with a badge. And a file. See, in their arrogance, Jacob and Cynthia had left a paper trail. Fraud. Asset manipulation. Even forgery. And the moment they tried to force power of attorney through their lawyer weeks ago, they slipped. Now the state was investigating. But the real twist. Dolores. Turns out she wasn't just a guest in their house. She was part owner of one of Cynthia's businesses, the very boutique that had failed, the one I had unknowingly bailed out. And now, she was on the hook for unpaid taxes I never agreed to cover. I sat with Maria and my attorney that evening, sipping coffee as they went through documents. "Ruth," Maria said, "once we file these charges, it could get ugly." He nodded. "Good. Let the truth be ugly. It's the only way they'll learn." But before we could submit the full report, a letter arrived at my door. Legal letter. From Jacob. It wasn't a threat. It was a settlement offer. He was trying to backpedal. Trying to offer me a buyout, an apology letter, and shared custody visitation for Ellie if I dropped the investigation. He even included a handwritten note. It said, "Mom, please. Let's not destroy each other. We're still family." I stared at that letter for a long time. And then I picked up the phone. Not to call Jacob, but to call the detective. Because I wasn't afraid of destruction anymore. I was afraid of silence. And I refused to be silent ever again. But when the detective arrived at my house the next morning, what he told me left me shaking. Because the paper trail didn't just lead to fraud. It led to something darker. Trust fund. One meant for Ellie. One I had set up, but never activated. And someone had forged my signature to access it. Over $40,000 had disappeared. And there was only one person who had the key to that account. Cynthia. Type "Speak Truth" in the comments if you believe Ruth should finish what she started. Like and subscribe to follow the next chapter, where the investigation explodes, and Cynthia's secret betrayal comes to light in the most public way possible. The detective's voice was calm, but every word hit like a hammer. We traced the withdrawals back to a private account opened in Cynthia's name, tied to a business listed under her mother, Dolores. We believe the funds were moved slowly, in increments of $2,000 or less, to avoid suspicion. Classic structuring. I sat at my kitchen table, stunned. The same table where I'd once taught Jacob to spell his name. The same table where Cynthia used to sit and sip tea, calling me Mom like it actually meant something. And now, they had stolen from a child. From my grandchild. From the trust one had quietly built over the years with birthday money, saved bonuses, and pension leftovers. A fund Ellie wasn't even supposed to know about until she turned 18. "How long?" I asked. "Almost 2 years," the detective replied. "It started shortly after you signed over partial business authority to help Cynthia qualify for her store's expansion loan. You probably didn't know she added herself as a beneficiary. I hadn't known. And the betrayal burned deeper than anything that came before. Jacob and Cynthia hadn't just excluded me, mocked me, or tried to push me into a nursing home. They had used me. Like an ATM. Like a signature machine. And worst of all, they had stolen from a little girl who still thought her parents were heroes. I looked over at Ellie, who was reading on the couch, wrapped in the pink blanket we had picked out together from the thrift store last week. She had no idea that the money I had saved for her college, her future, was gone. But I couldn't keep it from her forever. So I sat beside her, held her hand, and told her the truth in words that wouldn't crush her. "There was money set aside for you," I said softly. "To help you when you grow up. But someone took it. Someone who shouldn't have." She looked up. "Was it Daddy?" I hesitated, then nodded once. She didn't cry. She just turned her face away, lips trembling. Why would he do that? Had no answer. Only more resolve. The next day I met with my lawyer and the detective and gave them the green light. Full criminal investigation. Fraud. Forgery. Embezzlement. We filed the report. I handed over every document, every email, every bank statement. And then, I sent Jacob and Cynthia one final message. Subject line. "This is not just about the chair anymore. Buddy. You stole from me. You stole from Ellie. And now you'll answer for it in front of everyone you tried to impress." I didn't expect a reply. But I got one. It was just 2 words. "You'll regret this." But for once I wasn't scared. Let me tell you what scared me before. Sitting alone on Christmas Eve. Feeling invisible in a room I helped build. Watching the people I loved pretend I didn't matter. But now, I was no longer afraid of being alone. I was afraid of silence. And silence was over. The next week, Cynthia was served in front of her yoga studio. Jacob received his papers at work, right in front of his staff. And Dolores. She was approached at her country club by a process server holding a manila envelope. The buzz in town spread like wildfire. Suddenly, people were whispering again, but not about me forgetting birthdays or being too involved. Now they were saying, "Did you hear what Ruth uncovered?" Bless her soul, she stood up. She was right all along. But while the legal system moved slowly, something happened that neither I nor the lawyers expected. Cynthia cracked. Not publicly. Not with an apology. But with panic. She called me. First I didn't pick up. But when she called the third time I answered. "Ruth," she said, voice shaking. "Please. Don't ruin us. Think about the kids." "Your kids?" "Yes. The ones you used as leverage. Or mine, who you locked out and tried to erase." "I made mistakes," she whispered. "But jail. Do you really want Ellie's mother behind bars?" I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I simply said, "Ellie deserves better than a mother who thinks love comes with theft." Then I hung up. But something she said haunted me. Well, I didn't want that. Not really. But consequences were necessary. So I called my lawyer and said, "Let's give them one final offer." We drafted a settlement with clear terms. Cynthia repays every stolen cent into Ellie's trust fund. Jacob formally renounces any power of attorney over me. Dolores is removed from all shared accounts and business ties. A public written apology, notarized, delivered to the court. And if they didn't agree, we'd proceed. They had 48 hours. On the second night, a knock came at my door. It was raining. Thunder rolled in the distance. I opened the door slowly. And there stood Dolores. Alone. No umbrella. No smug smile. Just shaking hands, mascara running, and one sentence on her lips. "I need to tell you something before they bury you with more lies." Type "Truth Wins" in the comments if you believe Ruth is uncovering more than just fraud. Like and subscribe because the next chapter is the final showdown. The truth Dolores reveals. It will destroy everything Jacob and Cynthia tried to hide. Dolores stood on my porch like a woman unraveling. Her blouse was soaked through, her lipstick smudged, and her eyes, usually cold and calculating, were red-rimmed, desperate. For a moment she didn't say a word. She just stood there, shivering beneath the porch light, as thunder rumbled behind her. I didn't move. I didn't speak. Let her speak first. "I didn't know they were going to take it that far," she whispered finally. "Not the trust fund. Not the power of attorney thing. I swear, Ruth, I didn't know." I folded my arms. "You sat in my chair and helped them build a case to erase me." She flinched. "I was wrong. I know that now. You're just afraid of going down with them." Dolores wiped her eyes. "I came here because there's something worse. Something you don't know yet." I raised an eyebrow. "Worse than stealing from a child?" She nodded slowly. "Jacob. He forged your signature on more than the trust documents. He's been moving assets for months. Retirement accounts, bonds, your name tied to them. Cynthia said it was a backup plan, in case you ever fought back." My stomach turned. "He knew about your accounts from when you helped them with the house," she went on, "and he started reallocating some things. I helped fill out some forms, but I didn't understand what they were for. Until now." I stared at her, heart thudding. "You're telling me they're not just thieves," I said, voice cold. "They're calculated thieves. They prepared to strip me dry the moment I stopped saying yes." "Yes," she whispered. "And if you don't act fast, they'll drain you completely before the case hits court." I stepped back into the house and motioned for her to follow. Maria, my realtor, and Clara, my attorney, were already in the living room reviewing the last of the settlement terms. When I walked in with Dolores behind me, they both stiffened. Ladies, I said. We're updating our strategy. We now have a witness. Dolores sat down and, for the next 2 hours, spilled everything. Count numbers, emails, conversations. How Jacob bragged about me not lasting much longer, and how Cynthia said they could clean it all up after a few months in the home. Dolores had receipts, screenshots, forwarded emails. She handed it all over. I can't undo what I did, she said, voice cracking. But maybe I can stop it from getting worse. Clara leaned forward. You're prepared to testify? Dolores nodded. Yes. By the following morning, we had updated our criminal complaint, added new charges, and submitted the witness affidavit. And by Friday, everything exploded. The local news station aired a special segment. Woman, 79, fights back after son and daughter-in-law steal from her and her grandchild. They blurred names, but everyone in Fairhope knew exactly who it was about. People I hadn't heard from in years called and messaged me, saying how proud they were. Strangers dropped off flowers. Some even offered to testify about how I had helped them, nursed their children, paid for groceries, offered rides when no one else would. It was as though the town remembered me again. But not as a victim. As a survivor. As a fighter. Meanwhile, Jacob and Cynthia went silent. No more threats. No more apologies. Just quiet. Probably on the advice of their new lawyer. And then, court day arrived. I wore the same lavender suit I wore when Ellie was baptized. My husband's wedding ring still on a chain around my neck. Ellie held my hand as we walked into the courtroom. Head high, heart steady. The courtroom was packed. Maria and Clara flanked me like soldiers. Dolores sat across the aisle, waiting to be called. And Jacob. He couldn't even look me in the eye. The judge reviewed every document, every accusation, and every shred of evidence. She called Dolores to the stand first. Her testimony. Devastating. The forged signatures. The account transfers. The plan to declare me mentally unfit. Then Ellie was asked if she wanted to speak. I told her she didn't have to. But she nodded and stood. My grandma is the only person who listens to me, she said, voice shaking. She makes me feel safe. I want to stay with her. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the judge's expression softened. Finally, after reviewing all the evidence, the judge delivered her ruling. Cynthia was ordered to repay every stolen cent into the trust fund, with interest. Jacob was stripped of any power of attorney and barred from accessing or managing any of my accounts. Criminal charges were referred to the district attorney's office. And I was granted full and permanent guardianship of Ellie. But what came next? That was mine to decide. I had the chance to press for prison. To bury them the way they tried to bury me. But I did something unexpected. I asked for public restitution instead. I wanted them to speak, on camera, in writing, wherever it reached most, what they did and why it was wrong. I wanted them to say it. Loud. To every person who had ever wondered if I was the villain they made me out to be. And they agreed. 'Cause they had no choice. So a week later, a video appeared online. Jacob stood in a suit that looked too small, eyes hollow, voice barely above a whisper. I stole from my mother. I lied about her health. I betrayed her trust. I let greed replace love. Cynthia followed, lips trembling. I used Ruth. I thought age meant weakness. But she showed me what strength really looks like. I watched that video once. Just once. Then I shut the laptop, took Ellie to the porch swing and told her, this is the last time we talk about them. From now on we build something new. She nodded. Like what? Smiled. Like a future where no one decides your value. Where you fight for what's right. Where you always have a seat at the table. Ellie leaned her head against my shoulder. And we rocked. Back and forth. Back and forth. The sun dipped lower behind the trees. And for the first time in years, I felt light again. Because I didn't just take back my chair. Took back my life. And they'll never take it from me again. If this story touched your heart, reminded you that strength doesn't come from age but from truth, and gave you hope, please like, comment and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to remember that no one is ever too old to fight back. Your story matters too. It's been 6 months since that day in court. The house Jacob and Cynthia tried to control. Sold. I took my portion of the profit and used it to start something I'd only dreamed about before. The Ruth Mays Foundation, a small non-profit in town that helps elderly women understand their rights, manage their finances, and protect their futures from greedy hands. We host monthly workshops at the community center, and every week we get more phone calls from women saying, "I thought I was the only one." You're not. You're never the only one. Ellie is thriving. She's in a new school now, a better one, where she's surrounded by friends who don't whisper behind her back. She sees a therapist once a week, where she talks about everything that happened. But she also talks about baking, about painting, about our Saturday morning pancakes, about how she wants to become a lawyer when she grows up, so no one can trick Grandma ever again. She calls me my real home. Sometimes she calls me Mom. I cry in the quiet sometimes. Not because I'm sad, but because I survived. Because I thought the worst thing in the world was being left out of Christmas dinner. But the truth. The worst thing is not knowing your worth until someone tries to steal it. And the best thing is reclaiming it. Fully. Fiercely. Finally. Jacob and Cynthia moved 2 towns over. They keep their heads down now. Dolores sold her condo and disappeared from social life entirely. Rumor has it she's living in a rented trailer outside Baton Rouge. I wish her peace, but not forgiveness. Not yet. I no longer answer their calls. I no longer owe them explanations. The law took care of the facts. But time has taken care of my heart. There's a new chair in my house. It's not the one they took from me. That one was too stained, too broken to salvage. No, this one is brand new. I bought it myself. Plush, wide, soft. It faces the morning light. And no one will ever sit in it unless I invite them. Ellie knows that. She made a sign for it out of glitter and glue that reads, "Grandma's throne. Respect required." It hangs above the chair now. And every time I sit in it, I remember. They thought I'd grow too old to matter. They thought I'd be too soft to fight. But I am Ruth Eleanor Mays. I am not disposable. I am not silent. And I am never ever standing in the kitchen again. If this story reminded you to stand tall, reclaim your space, and protect your truth, don't let it end here. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to remember they are never too old to take their life back. Your voice is powerful. Your story matters. And so do you.